welcome everyone to the podcast today. I've been talking about on the YouTube channel how I was planning to film a podcast for the past 3 weeks now. Finally managed to sort it out with my mentor, Nick, over here. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. So my name is Nick Earle. I have had a long career in IT, but to give you the very short version, I was in the first year of university students when computing was a thing. So timing was everything. And I then, for the last 45 years, have totally done IT jobs, nothing else. Baylor, and I've been working in 5 countries. I've run 2 pretty large businesses inside very large companies. So an $11 billion piece of Cisco, and then running global marketing for Hewlett-Packard in Silicon Valley, which was pretty fun during .com. Been CEO of 2 companies. I've been chairman of 2, been on the board of several companies. And now I am building an AI company in the recruitment space for early in career candidates. And you're helping me with that, which I'm sure we'll come on to later on in the pod.
100%. It's going to be, stay tuned because it's going to be juicy at the end for that. But Nick, maybe we should talk about how we first met. Mm-hmm. Pretty interesting. So it was in a lecture.
Yeah.
In the first lecture.
I think it was the first one, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it was quite bizarre. And the best way I can describe it is just what happened. So the story, of course, is that I was invited to give a series of lectures at the local university to where I live, which is Royal Holloway University, which is where you're studying. And it was on the business studies course, and I was supposed to give, what I did give, a small lecture at the end of the standard business studies content. And the juxtaposition between the two was quite bizarre, in that you're talking about, organizational theory from 1922 and textbooks written in 1936. And here was I talking about AI and agents and what's going to happen to the future of work, and how all work is going to be augmented, and university education isn't the best way of getting a career. And it was very controversial, and I didn't know whether I was going to get thrown out, actually. But I wasn't thrown out. And at the end of the very first interview, I remember you walked up to me and said, I really like that content, and can we chat? And you asked for a mentor, and I went, would I be a mentor? And I said, yeah. And
pitched to you, actually.
You did pitch. You actually tried to sell me something at the end of the lecture.
Straight away.
I didn't buy it, but you straight away tried to sell me something and started talking about how you do cold calling of an evening, and you're an entrepreneur. And I said, you seem like an interesting guy. So I said, yeah. And that was maybe 3 or 4 months ago, my guess is.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And since then, a lot has happened. But that's how we met. And I think there's a lesson there, by the way, for your listeners. Sometimes opportunities arise, but only if you have the courage and the initiative to grasp them.
To go for
because
it.
There was probably 100 people in the lecture theatre, and you're the one that I agreed to meet afterwards. And that's because you stood up to me and approached me, whereas a lot of people sort of shuffled out. And maybe they did want to approach, maybe they didn't. But there is a lesson there, which I'm sure we'll get on to, as to how you get on in life, how you succeed in your career, how you take advantage of opportunities. And sometimes you just have to have the courage to leap into the unknown, which is what you did.
Move forward. And really kind of, I feel like my main thinking points were, because in the lecture I was actually doing business work while listening, because I had some emails to send, because it was
That's a hell of a confession. So you mean you really weren't concentrating on organizational theory from 1923?
I was concentrating on that, and then I looked at the board and it said Nick, CEO of Eseye or Eseye?
Eseye, the company that I was CEO of at the time. And
now you're chairman.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I said to my friend next to me, mate, I'm going to look at this guy up on Google, see what he's done. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, look, look at the stuff that you managed to achieve. And I said to him, at the end of this lecture, I'm going to go talk to you. And in my head as well, I was like, okay, so there's a potential chance as he's a guest that he might leave early. So I said to him, if he leaves early, I'm going to put my computer in my bag, walk out and try
Chase
to get
me.
work. Yeah.
But he didn't need to in the end.
You got swarmed by a lot of people.
I did get swamped, yeah, but only one person pitched me, and only one person persuaded me that it was we should meet. And another lesson there, because I'm always thinking about the viewers on your podcast, is that they're thinking, well, how do I get doors open for me?
Yes.
And you can't plan it, but of course, what you didn't know at the time, and it's worth people understanding this, is that I was going there knowing that I was going to build this AI company. It's kind of a bit strange. I've become an entrepreneur in my late 60s, which is a whole other subject we can talk about. But I was actually looking for younger people with, ingredient X. And it was the reason I'd signed up for the lectures, because I wanted to meet those people. I wouldn't normally meet them. So what you didn't know is that you actually, by coming up front and pitching it, were actually pitching to someone who was looking for somebody to join the founding team of this AI company he was building. And so sometimes, the serendipity of the moment is that, what's the worst that could have happened? I could have said, no, go away. I'm busy. And what if, you've wasted 30 seconds. But, it is not everybody did that. Now, to be fair, there are 3 students who are helping us, and all 3, yourself and the other 2, individually did a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so as I say, there's a lesson there in terms of what people look for, looking for initiative, courage, seizing the moment, and just trying it. And what's the worst that can happen is someone can say no. But then, as you say, you can chase them out of the room. You can chase them out of the room and ask them again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another lesson that I want to say as well is, if you're afraid to really talk to that one person who you know that you need to speak to potentially go further, you either go up in your career or you stay the same. You don't go down at all.
You never go down.
Exactly.
Yeah, you never go down. It's not like snakes and ladders. You don't go back to zero.
Exactly.
Unless you screw up. But I don't think this podcast is about screwing up.
It's about achieving great things.
There we go.
100%.
Much more positive.
What would you say when you first started your journey as an entrepreneur? When about was that time, and what would you say is something that you wish when you were my age that you knew?
Okay, there's a few things there to unpack. Let's take the first one. So I said previously that I'd become an entrepreneur in my late 60s. And what I meant by that is a true entrepreneur, as in starting a company, building a company, which I'm sure we'll talk about in much more detail later. Absolutely. However, when I look back on my career, I actually now realize, with the benefit of hindsight, that I was actually an entrepreneur all the time. And what I mean by that is that you can be an entrepreneur in a large company. Mm-hmm. People think that you can't be an entrepreneur unless you are literally an entrepreneur and starting your own business. But actually, large businesses are very prone to technology-driven disruption. And historically, every new wave of technology, such as the internet or the PC or cloud, mobile computing devices like the iPhone, smartphones, open source, and in particular now AI, every wave of technology creates opportunity, but it also disrupts the incumbents. And so incumbents have a big brand, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of people, and it's not that they don't understand it, it's just very difficult to change. So within large companies, there's always a group of people who are the internal disruptors. And if I look back on my career, and I talked about 2 very large companies, which were Cisco and Hewlett-Packard, I was in both cases the internal disruptor. I hesitated because it's sort of like the troublemaker. I'll tell you a little story. Perhaps sums it up. When I was at HP, and an opportunity came up to go to California, we moved. My wife and our two girls, we moved to California, Silicon Valley during the whole dot-com boom, which was an amazing time to be. Very, very similar to what it is right now with AI, because all the big AI companies are in San Francisco. But HP had a very famous CEO called Lou Platt, and he was very conservative engineer. And Lou was stepping down, and because the HP hadn't embraced the internet, and in came this lady, Carly Fiorina, who was from a completely different culture. First time they'd hired a CEO from outside the company. She was from a telecom company called Lucent, and she was a sales and marketing person. Okay. And I remember she took. I was senior vice president there. There were about 60 senior vice presidents at HP, but I was running global marketing, and we had an offsite, a beautiful hotel by the sea in California, and we were all called in one at a time to meet Carly in her first week on the job, and she had a folder with our name on the desk as you walked in. So I walked in, and I'd seen other people walk into this room, and they either turned left or turned right when they disappeared, when they'd finished the meeting. If they turned left, they were smiling. If they turned right, they were not smiling, and they went to see the HR director, who was in another room down the way. Basically, they'd been laid off. So she was doing an instant reorganization within the first 5 days. So I went in there absolutely bricking myself. Am I going to turn left or right? So she had this manila binder folder on her desk, and it said Nick Earle. And so she said, "Oh, welcome, sit down." And then she said, "So it's interesting." She said, "I've been watching some of your speeches," and I thought, "Oh shit," because it was just when YouTube and it was just coming out then, and I'd been giving these speeches because I was the marketing guy. I was doing a lot. I was doing TV work. I was doing magazine interviews. I was doing a lot of public speaking at conferences. Yeah, it was fun, hard work, but it's all down to the prep. But anyway, so she said, and I've been seeing that lately you've been criticizing HP. And I thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to be turning right to the I'm going to be getting my papers to leave. And she said, you've been saying that we're slow, we're lethargic, we can't change, and unless we do change and embrace the internet, the company's going to go bust. And you've said, quite frankly, and it's here on record, and she had it written down, that and if the company doesn't embrace the internet, they'll lose all their best talent. I thought, oh God, this is like the worst performance review I've ever had. And so she said to me, "Do you really believe that?" The first time I'd ever met her, I said, "Well, yeah, I wouldn't have said it." I thought, well, the hell of it, I'm fired. How do I tell my wife? I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't say it, and I didn't believe it. I actually think that unless we embrace the internet, HP, which was at one time the biggest company in tech, people don't realize that. HP, Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard, built Hewlett-Packard, and their first customer was Walt Disney, who bought it. They designed a product to make the film Fantasia, to do the sound mixing Fantasia, and then from then on they became Hewlett-Packard, and they're known now for printers and PCs and whatever. Anyway, I said, this giant of the industry, the biggest employer in Silicon Valley as well at the time. I said, we'll go bust, and frankly, I'll go back to the UK, And so she looked at me and she said, "Well, I agree with you." I thought, oh, that's interesting. She said, "Which is why you've got a new job starting right now. You're president of the internet for Hewlett-Packard, and you have a reporting line to me, and I want you to be the disruptor going out there telling the world that HP is now an internet company." And I went, okay, okay, so what's our internet strategy?
Yeah.
And she said, "That's correct." I said, no, I don't think you heard me. "What's our internet strategy?" She said, "No, you didn't hear me. That's correct. That's the question. Your first task is to work out what the internet strategy is for the company, and I want to see you in 10 days in my office."
See, guys, that's exactly what you have to do.
Well, an opportunity arose. I
You
spoke
took it.
truthfully. I took it. Well, actually, I'd taken the opportunity for the previous 3 months by being disruptive, standing on stages. And, of course, little did I realize that people were watching the video. I didn't even know they were being recorded. I was that naive.
Wow.
But you tell the truth, and you have passion, and you have belief, and of course you've researched it. So I ended up as president of what's called the Internet Incubator. So basically, trying to design the strategy for the internet for HP. We were given headcount 250. We were given office space. We put a pirate flag in the middle of the office space, and we said, if you were so pissed off with HP that you thought we were going to go bankrupt because we're not embracing the internet, and you're about to resign, you haven't told your boss, then you're perfect for us, and you've got a job working for me. And 250 people came to us, and we did some great stuff.
I think that's such a big lesson in there, that you should really take grasp of any opportunity that you're given if you believe that it can make a difference. And being a disruptor, being someone who, you're outspoken with what you say, because when you were talking about that, I was thinking, wow, she must have been so angry.
I was convinced she was angry. But of course, in retrospect, the reason they went for an outsider is because the board kind of knew the problem, but they didn't think the current management team could fix it. So this conversation started off about whether you have to be an entrepreneur. And I think in the world of AI, there will be many, many more entrepreneurs. I'm sure we'll come back to that. But you can actually be an entrepreneur inside a company, but it's a different type of entrepreneur because it's about change management.
Okay.
And, HP had 70,000 employees. And their business model was to sell boxes, i.e. a computer, a server, a PC. And by embracing the internet, we were turning products into services. So instead of buying a computer, you would pay for it. You'd basically rent it. You'd pay for it over a period of months. But if you were a sales rep, Baylor, and you had a commission where you had to sell $3 million worth of HP Unix computers, which is about the average quota, I would say to you, you've got this great deal. We're not going to charge $40,000 a box. What we're going to do is we're going to ask people to pay $3,000 a month. But within 14 months, we're already making more money than we were by selling the box. And you'd say, yeah, but I've still got a $3 million quota. I'm not going to make my quota in year one because I can't sell 40,000. And so it's actually change management because but by embracing as a service, we had to change all the accounting systems, all the operational systems, all the commission systems, all the product literature, all the marketing, which is why I guess one of the reasons she chose me, all the branding, all the analyst briefings, every single part of the company had to be changed whilst we were still going forward because Wall Street only gives you still had to produce the numbers every quarter.
That's true.
So being an entrepreneur in a big company is often change management. So I did it twice, once with HP, once with Cisco. Being an entrepreneur in a small company is more about sensing what's happening and pivoting and moving quickly. And then the third type of entrepreneur is someone who says, I'm going to build something myself, which is what you have been doing. And I'm going to take control of my own destiny. And I'm not going to follow anybody else because I've got this idea and I'm convinced I can do it. That's a much harder one because the money tends to take a lot longer before it comes in.
But when it comes in,
if it's on equity, if it works,
yes.
And you only hear about the ones that worked. So if it works, then it's great. And there are all these videos of people who interview successful people. For every one of those, there's 1,000 people in places that didn't work. So different models, but all about innovation, understanding the role of technology in disrupting business models,
yes,
and embracing change. I would say they were the constant features.
But I imagine out of all the 1,000, how many of the 1,000 would have been successful if they kept on going for another year. I mean, I'm sure there's been many points in my entrepreneurial journey where I've thought about quitting, where I've thought about let me stop because that person's right over there saying that I'm too young to start. Let me just be like my friends and go out and just have fun and just, get a part-time job. What's the harm in that? But I feel like, and those times have come every now and again, but I feel like if you just keep on going, you can't fail. It's inevitable that.
I 90% agree, but let me tell you a few more stories. So I've had exactly this conversation with two people who people watching the pod will know. One is Stelios, who is the EasyJet founder. I was on the board of one of his companies. And the other one is Jeff Bezos, the founder of
spoke to Jeff
Amazon.
Bezos?
I'll come back to I spoke to him for several hours one-on-one. Let me come to the Stelios one first. Now, Stelios had an idea. He basically copied Southwest Airlines' business model from the US and brought it to Europe. So it wasn't his idea. It also helped the fact that his father was a Greek shipping tycoon and gave him $100 million on his 18th birthday. So let's just say he didn't start off penniless entrepreneur, but he's subsequently created lots of companies, and a lot of them have failed, and a few of them have succeeded. But he basically. What the thing that, and I'll come to the Jeff Bezos story in a second, but the thing I've seen about entrepreneurs, because when I was running the internet incubator for HP, I had a sum of money to invest, like an internal venture capital company. So I met the founders of a lot of the companies that subsequently became famous.
Okay.
And so I'll come back to Jeff Bezos being one of them. I met Jeff Bezos when, they were still working with desks which were second-hand doors they bought at the tip,
so when he
and
had
they
hair.
turned them upside down. Yeah, he had hair, well, not too much actually, but he was penniless. But the thing about the entrepreneur, well, he wasn't penniless, but he come from a banking background. But the thing about entrepreneurs is that they have a vision, they lock onto it, they have a belief, and no matter how many setbacks they get, they carry on, and that's the point that you were making. But to balance it, statistically, only a few make it. And I think one of the hard things to do as an entrepreneur is to realize when it's not going to work. And I used the word pivot earlier because you can pivot your idea. Mm-hmm. There was a great podcast of the founders of Instagram. This podcast is a series called How I Built This, which is a great podcast series. And the founders of Instagram were trying to create a photo site, and it just wasn't working. And they'd maxed out all their credit cards, and they'd mortgaged this, and they'd borrowed from family, and they were down to like the last 30 days of money. They were about to give up, and they just suddenly noticed that of the people who were using it, if I've got this recall this story correctly, the ones that the model which they never aimed at was people taking photographs while they were on holiday and sharing them.
Okay.
So they actually pivoted Instagram to be sharing memories or of your holiday and Instagram. And I think famously they were sold for, I don't know, certainly north of $1 billion when they only had 12 employees.
That's unbelievable.
But the point is that it's not that companies are binary. It's not they succeed or fail. There's a lot of companies that have ended up as successful after doing 5 or 6 pivots. So I think that's another lesson. Let me come back to the Bezos story. So I was running the internet incubator, and HP was getting their butts kicked by a company that no longer exists anymore called Sun Microsystems. And Sun Microsystems were the .in .com back in the day. They were the company that was the internet.
Really?
And they were calling it, their pugnacious CEO, Scott McNealy, who, if you're a golf fan, is the father of McNealy, the American golfer who's doing very well at the moment. But anyway, he said HP was a big, dumb, fat, happy printer company. And Carly, when she was brought on board, hated that. So she said to me, Nick, you need to win Amazon. and pinch it off Sun. It's like, okay, yeah, right. So essentially, another coincidence, I found myself on an airplane, and I heard them saying a lot about Sun, and it turns out that Ed Zander, who was McNeely's number 2, was sat next to me, and all these Sun guys were talking about it, and they were talking about internal stuff, and I said, look, I just need to let you know I'm from HP, and you may want to be careful what you're saying. And one thing led to another, and I built up a relationship because I'm right in the middle of all these Sun execs, and we got the opportunity to get an intro to Bezos, and I found myself on the HP plane because Carly famously, in her first week of being appointed CEO of HP, bought a Gulfstream jet.
Oh my
Now,
word.
Lou Platt, the previous CEO, flew coach, or what we would call economy.
Yeah.
Famously, never even sat at the front. He sat at the back, CEO of Hewlett-Packard, biggest company in Silicon Valley. Carly bought a Gulfstream 4 in her first week. So we're talking different people.
So do you think she's raising the standards there?
Well, she was trying to change the company, raise the standards, and she said, Nick, I want you, we're going to do a New York event, and I want you, we'd managed to secure a couple of servers in Sun, which was, from a marketing point of view, that's enough. We got 2 servers. They're a customer. And I want you to, I was like a taxi driver. I want you to take the jet, go to Seattle, pick up Jeff Bezos, and fly him to Teterboro outside New York. And he's got to walk on stage tomorrow morning, and I introduce him as our newest customer, and that will move the stock price. That was Carly.
That story reminds me of, have you watched Wolf of Wall Street?
Yes.
Where they get Steve Madden
to
come through, and they make it all good, and then they prepare it, and he has his big speech.
Yeah. And the audience, And so anyway, I found myself on a corporate jet, one-on-one like this, with Jeff Bezos, right? I thought, shit, what do I say? I mean, it was obvious. I think he may have just IPO'd, I think. Anyway, it was February 99, so I'm sure people look it up and say, well, I'm sure some of the dates are blurred. But anyway, he was a famous guy, but he wasn't what he is now. So I said to him, he started asking me some questions, and I answered them. And then, you know that awkward moment when you meet somebody and, the conversation dries up and you go, well, after about 10 minutes, we had that awkward moment where we realized we had nothing in common.
Okay.
And it was an overnight flight to New York. So I thought, well, I could say, why don't we get some sleep because you're on stage tomorrow morning? And I thought, God, no, you're with Jeff Bezos. You'll never get this chance again. So I said to him, I thought, what could I ask him? And the only thing I could think of to ask him was to say, what's next for Amazon, Jeff? Well, he lit up like he'd swallowed a gallon of adrenaline, jumped out of his seat, started waving his arms. Bear in mind, it's a beautiful Gulfstream jet, but we're on a jet, and he's waving his arms, and he starts talking about, he said, we're going to sell everything. Now, bearing in mind, they sold books, and they'd just gone into CDs, right? So electronic books, electronic CDs. He said, we're going to sell everything. That's why I call the company Amazon. Biggest river in the world, biggest company in the world. I went, everything. Yeah, everything. I said, so everything digital, right? He went, no, you don't understand. Everything. He said, everything. Clothes, toys, food. He said, if you can buy it in a shop, we'll sell it, and there's nothing they can do to stop us. I thought, this guy is out of his tree.
Crazy.
He's crazy. 1999, 8 years before the iPhone.
Yeah.
Right? Internet hadn't really taken off. He said, I'm going to sell everything. He already had in his head, in 1999, the business model for the warehouses and the robots. Okay. He said, there'll be huge warehouses. We'll pick it with robots. And all the money's in the storage of stock in the warehouse, the distribution, the supply chain is really inefficient. Because remember, he was a business analyst on Wall Street.
Yeah.
So he had analyzed all the costs, and he basically said 70% of the cost of any end-user product is the supply chain. So if I can cut out the supply chain, I can be cheaper for every product in the world. And so now, of course, you can order. We all know you can order anything off Amazon. He didn't mention cloud computing, but because that it wasn't, that came out of something else inside Amazon. But the point was that he, as an entrepreneur, like Stelios, knew what he wanted to build. Jeff knew what he wanted to build. Even though the technology didn't exist, he was betting on the exponential nature of technology, that it would get 40% smaller, faster, cheaper every year.
Yeah.
So every year it would be 40% easier for him to implement the vision. And so he was always going to win. That clarity of thought, in my experience, is what makes true entrepreneurs stand out. The postscript of the story is, I thought he was a screwball. I mean, I just thought, this guy's crazy. He's never going to do that. So I said, okay, we need to get to sleep, and we should get some sleep because we've got to be in New York on stage in the morning. But what I should have done is not said that. I should have said to him, that's amazing, Jeff. Can I have a job? Because, and I'm going to go back from California to Europe, and why don't you make me Amazon #1 employee in Europe, and I'll run Amazon in Europe for you. I think you're a visionary, and I think that's amazing. I didn't say that.
Hindsight's a wonderful
I didn't
thing.
say that. I thought, you're a nut job, and I went to sleep, and that's why he's where he is. And
I mean,
and here I am.
I mean, Nick, a lot of people sitting at home watching this, they're going to be like, look at you. But, I mean, there's so many different levels of crazy achievement. Like, from what you achieved from Liverpool, you say you were working class?
Well, we didn't think of ourselves as working class, and I certainly didn't have the accent I do have now. But I would say we were... I don't like pigeonholing people on class, but we didn't have much money. Liverpool was tough. There was much tougher areas than where we lived in. But yeah, my dad was an insurance agent who collected premiums door to door, collected money, bag of money. And my mum worked in a biscuit factory. And, the usual thing, first member of the family who'd never been to university, and then got a job. Whilst I was at university, I had a job offer at the end of my second year. So in those days, they used to sponsor you. It doesn't happen now.
So like a scholarship?
Yeah, well, it was called a bursary. So I got paid. They made me a job offer at the end of my second year, and and they would pay me weekly throughout my whole third year. But if I didn't join them when I graduated, I had to pay them the money back. But because I'm a workaholic, which is another part of my traits, I finished my finals on the Friday and started work on the Monday morning. And I've been working ever since. But, back in the day, it was a way, which I think is what you're getting at, it was a way of getting out.
Yeah.
Because you had to take control of your own destiny, and I knew that education was the key to get out. So I don't know anybody else who got out. But then I went down to London, and various things happened along the way.
I mean, just thinking about that, and just like your whole journey from, being in university to getting the job to where you are now, I would say, from even looking on from the outside, I would probably say that there was a lot of perseverance and a lot of discipline and maybe even delusion to get you to this point.
Probably.
I mean, I think I'd probably say a lot of people would think I'm delusional. I mean, I've told you some of my goals. I'm sure
you have, yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people from the outside who might not know me would think this guy's crazy.
Everything is crazy until somebody proves it. And then everybody says, "Oh, I always believe that." It's true. Every new product, a new technology is initially indistinguishable from magic,
Yes.
and then it's like obvious. Or another way of putting it is, especially in tech, because tech's a wonderful world to be in. there's a great phrase which is technology is only technology to you if you were born before it was invented. So in my case, the iPhone is technology.
Yes.
I mean, like when I first saw it, it's like, oh my God. And when he gave the speech in 2007, Steve Jobs, and he showed that you can make the picture bigger by doing your thumb and your finger and making the picture bigger, the audience, it's a great video to watch, by the way. When he does what's called, he says this, we call it the pinch, and he made the picture bigger, and the audience go, it's like 6,000 people in or 4,000, whatever, in the Flint Center in Cupertino, which is very near where I used to live. It was as if he had done magic on stage.
Now, if I was to see someone do that on their phone, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, whatever, dude. You know, I mean, like that's obvious. And so that, but somebody had the vision initially, and so again, I always put the caveat on it is that people remember the stories, they remember the achievements. You mentioned in your intro, you know, if you're honest with yourself when you look back, you've also got a whole series of things that were wrong decisions, bad decisions, times when you thought, oh my God, I've screwed up.
Yes.
No one knocks it out of the park straight away. At least I don't think they do. But the key is, do you recognize it? Do you reposition yourself, you know, knock yourself down, get back up? Do you reposition? Do you pivot? Do you learn from it? And do you carry on and not give up? And the ones who do that tend to stack the odds in their favor and tend to be the most successful. But they often end up building something they never thought of at the beginning, but then they never admit it because they just say, oh, well, this was always the case. People who know them say, he or she wasn't building that when I knew them. but you know, it's like a little speedboat. You just pivot.
Exactly. I mean, for me, when I even think about it, I think detachment is a really important thing. You mentioned pivoting quite a lot, and I feel like if you're very detached from having a certain outcome and you're not like that's the only sort of outcome that you want, it will be much more difficult to be successful. So like
Correct.
Those people who have said stuff like, no, it was always like that, I've always picked that. There's some people out there who will just not budge on their specific goal. And I also feel like when you fully embrace the law of detachment, I talk about it a lot on Instagram, but when you fully detach from it, things will come to you. When I first met you, I wasn't like, oh, I need to network with someone who's done so much in business. No, I was just like, the opportunity's there. I'm going to go speak to him. Whatever happens. When I first got my first client, I didn't think I was going to get my first client that day. It was a cold call. The conversation was random, and we just ended up like striking a very good relationship, and I ended up closing the deal. You know, even when I discovered online business, I was randomly scrolling to watch a video while I eat my dinner, but then I saw top 10 business models, and I was like, I'm bored, I'll just watch this. So you must detach from the outcome and really attach to the inputs, daily inputs that will take you there. So I'll end it off here. So instead of, you know, just attaching to what you believe you want, switch the plan, but not the end destination.
You see, I think that I agree with that, and I admire you for what you've done more at your age than I ever did at your age. I won't even ask you to tell me again how old you are because it will make me feel sick. Why the hell? How
18.
18, oh my God. If I tell you what I was doing at 18, I was finishing my A-levels in Liverpool, wondering whether I should go to university because I'd just met a girl and I didn't want to leave her. By the way, we've now been married 46 years, so it's the same girl, so it has a happy ending. But I think you're actually saying something different, and again, thinking of the audience in terms of lessons learned. Because as I say, I can talk just as much, if not more, about what not to do than what to do. It's human nature. You talk about what to do. But when I've been asked, you know, I've been lucky enough to do a lot of jobs. We've talked about a few of them, but you know, there's a few we haven't talked about yet. But often giving speeches, doing